Hi, Kia. Thank you so much for being here.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, I'm so excited you're here because I know that um, you are going to have so much wisdom to share with all the yoga teachers out there that are building their careers and finding their voice because you've done that in such a unique way. For our friends that are watching, I just wanted to share that if you're not familiar with Kia Miller, she is a wonderful yoga teacher, not only of Vinyasa yoga, but Kundalini yoga as well. And I've been blessed to be able to take both practices with her out in LA. And she's a yoga teacher trainer and the founder of Radiant Body Yoga, which is their own method and training. It's a 500-hour training that you can take that I believe takes place all over the world.
hmm
Yeah. So I'm sure you can go to her website and find out more information on that. But today we're going to talk a little bit about creating an abundant mindset and looking outside of the box when it comes to opportunities as a yoga teacher.
Wonderful. Such a great topic. And I think it'll be helpful to just open that doorway and perception of people of what's possible as a yoga teacher.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are because you really are building something incredibly unique.
Thank you. You know, everything that I've done has felt incredibly organic, and it's been just a step-by-step process. And for me, at least, that has worked wonders because it's meant that I've stayed really connected and integrity with what I'm presenting at any given time. So the absolute best advice I got when I just finished my teacher training, my first teacher training, was that I should dedicate myself for 3 to 5 years to a yoga studio and just build a following from there. Build my classes, build my skills as a teacher, and um, and then the second best bit of advice I got was that I should become the yes person. In order to get the slot at the studios that I wanted, I needed to be the yes person. So if anybody needed a sub, I would jump on it and I would go. And those two pieces of advice really served me at the beginning. Oh, and then the third piece of advice, which I love, and this I think is relevant because what I witness in Los Angeles is teachers are running around all over town. And if you're familiar with Los Angeles, 16 plus million people, this is a it feels like you're in the entire state and it's just Los Angeles. So going from one city within LA to another city can take a lot of time and energy. And so that third piece of advice, which was so helpful for me, was to pick a place that I wanted to make my home base and then really invest my time there. And if I couldn't get to that place right away, which I couldn't, I always knew I wanted to teach at YogaWorks, and I always knew I wanted to teach at YogaWorks on Main Street, which was where I ended up, which is actually where you took class with me. And I had to go to an independent studio first and just, get my wheels underneath me. Then I needed to take a class at another YogaWorks and then another YogaWorks. And then finally I got the most empty time slot at YogaWorks Main Street. I got the community class at 2:30 in the afternoon, 3 days a week. And I just dug in and I built it from 0 to like 35, 40. And it was to me, that was an example of just showing up day after day, being consistent, being reliable. Yogi Bhajan always said that people will love you for your consistency. Because that's so much of what's missing in today's world, is that sense of consistency of what can I rely on in these times of turbulence and change? What and who can I rely on? And if somebody knows that pretty much no matter what, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Kia's going to be at that 2:30 studio. Okay, I need to shift my schedule a bit, that 2:30 time slot, but I can get there. Then you start to build this sense of being the consistent base for somebody. So those were the three, I think those were the three things that got me going in my my teaching life. And I just would say, Tommy and I, my husband and I, loved to travel, and we traveled always all over. We were big music festival people. We'd go to every music festival. I'd teach yoga there. But then once I started on this trajectory, I became that person who never went anywhere. And my commitment, my number one commitment, other than to my marriage, obviously, was to stay regular in the studio. And boy, did it pay off. It really paid off. And I've noticed it for other teachers when they make that commitment, then to be that reliable person, it pays off. So that's where I would start.
Yeah, and I think that's such valuable advice. And I give that advice to teachers that I work with all the time, because consistency is key if you want to be successful in this particular this particular career path, but really any career path, frankly.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about how you transitioned from that being your the local Los Angeles go-to teacher of spirit, and going into what you're doing now, which is really quite unique and special.
Well, you know, it was interesting, even though I made that commitment, and I did a good I did more. I probably did 7 years of deep consistency. But even though I was doing that, I always knew that what I wanted to do was travel and teach. So I was very clear in my heart of what my intention was. And I was looking at teachers around me who were, you know, who were the biggest in the studio back at that time. And, you know, they were always there and they had massive classes. But then I always knew that, as attractive as that was on a certain level, that wasn't my end game. And so once I had developed enough of a consistency that I could start to do little trips, then I started first to teach at music festivals, teaching yoga. Then I started to teach at, you know, modern day yoga festivals. And interestingly, it was Yoga Journal who called the first, because they were curious about what I was doing with Kundalini yoga and just the way that I was presenting it, that they felt was a little bit more accessible. And so that was, I guess, my first in to conferences, yoga conferences and yoga festivals. And then Bhakti Fest. Bhakti Fest was one of those things. It's like, I feel like when you have the intention, you start to materialize things, and they happen in their own way, in their own time. One thing I did way back then was I'm very visual, so I love vision boarding. So I had my whole vision board going in front of my altar, and literally every single thing on that vision board came to pass. So, you know, it's a tool, obviously, that we can help to program the subconscious mind with. And in terms of Bhakti Fest, which is one of my all-time favorite festivals to teach at, I just finished leading a teacher training, a YogaWorks teacher training, and I was in Whole Foods, and one of the students who was in the training with me was complimenting me, and the guy who runs Bhakti Fest happened to be walking past the salad bar where we all were, and so he was like, well, who are you then? Should I know you? Why don't you come teach at my festival? It was like one of those moments. So I think those are always open. And then the other thing is that I had my deep love of Ashtanga. I had studied deeply the methodology of YogaWorks, which is like a combination of Ashtanga, Iyengar, and Vinaya Yoga. You know, the real modern day alignment-based, skillful sequencing-based classes that they have. I know you teach there too, so you understand their methodology. I think it's brilliant. Mm-hmm. And then I also was deeply into Kundalini yoga. And so on both sides, I had a fellow Kundalini yogi who, he and I both loved Ashtanga. We would always see each other in the Ashtanga room, and he would just joke to me and say, you know, we're doing Ashtanga Lini. We'd have our Ashtanga, but then we would have all of our Kundalini practices that we were also doing as part of our daily routine. And then I would have my mentor, Annie Carpenter, who I owe so much to. Absolutely. What a gem she was. She is one of those generous teachers that just kept giving. And then she would say to me, why don't you add some of that Kundalini stuff into your class? And so then I started to explore vinyasa from the perspective of adding in more breath, more meditative focus, pranayamas, meditation, so that the vinyasa class became something so much more than just the sequence leading to a peak pose with all of the alignment cues. It then started to become, that was just the base level, but then there was a whole breath level that evolved and moved. And then there was a whole meditative level and philosophical level. So that started to happen in my classes. And then in my Kundalini classes, I realized that this is all kind of happening at the same time. I realized that in your average Kundalini class, my experience in my body, I come from the stiff body. I've worked very hard to get the flexibility that I have. I realized I wasn't getting warmed up enough for the Kriyas. And I hurt myself a couple of times doing Kundalini yoga, and I was getting many reports of people around town who were having the same experience. And so I started to offer a class that gave a really thorough sun salutation based warm-up before the Kriya and meditation. And so these two are happening. My vinyasa classes are becoming very pranic based, breath based. My Kundalini classes are becoming more warm-up alignment into Kriya base. And so this kind of methodology just started to grow organically out of what I was doing. And so then, again, at the behest of the lovely Annie Carpenter, after teaching YogaWorks teacher trainings for about 7 years, she said to me, you have to get out and teach your own. Don't get stuck. And so she put the fire under me, and then I developed the Radiant Body Yoga teacher training methodology, which is kind of both those practices that I was just sharing. So depending as a teacher, if you're more vinyasa based, it was how do you infuse your classes with all these different layers of technique that you can bring somebody to a even more profound state of connection and awareness, and bring them into the deeper practices without it, being too off-putting. And then in the Kundalini, it was, how do I make Kundalini really meet the modern practitioner where they are? So somebody who doesn't have much time in the day, how can they get a bit of a workout in, fully warm up their body, and then get all the juicy stuff of the Kriya? So Radiant Body Yoga was born out of that. And in tandem to that, I was studying with 2 other different Kundalini lineages other than as taught by Yogi Bhajan. And they really informed the way that my teacher training came together. What I was looking for as a student at that time was I was looking for corroborations of these techniques that I was learning in Kundalini as taught by Yogi Bhajan. I wanted to see where those came in these other lineages, and to start to understand, the bigger origin of these teachings, where they all met, where they crossed over, which were the, prevalent teachings throughout the different lineages. And that's really what came through in my teacher training. So that's kind of a long-winded way. I don't think I've ever put it all in that way before, but that's what happened.
No, but I think that's really helpful for people to hear your path, because so often we, so many of us yoga teachers were on Instagram and we're on Facebook and we're seeing all of these things that all these really awesome teachers are doing. But I mean, overnight success is not real. Overnight success is a 10-year journey. So
yeah, exactly.
Or more. Yeah. So I think it's really helpful for teachers who are starting out to get a taste of how someone like you has gotten to where you are.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're right. It's that step by step, listening to the signs, listening to your teachers. And to me, there's nothing more valuable than my own direct experience.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a definitive point in my teaching and in my life when I came to that moment of realization that uh, I didn't need to keep chasing any more outside information or techniques. That every big jump that came from that realization was that it was going to come from my own practice. And so it shifted from an external seeking of all of validating information and traditions, and that kind of happened through creating the teacher training. I studied vastly and really deep, and then I got to the end of that and I recognized that everything that I was to do from there was going to come from my own inner research. And that was a profound moment of, of transition, from knowledge taken in to wisdom received from your own practice, if that makes sense.
Yes, I think that's really profound for so many people. I think that one of the things that I have fallen victim to, and I'm sure many yoga teachers out there, is that we are lifelong students, we're lifelong learners. And one of the reasons this path is so satisfying for us is that there's always something new to learn. There's always someone creating something really cool that you want to study. There's always another lineage. There's always another book. There's always another
Yeah.
movement modality. I mean, so many yoga teachers are now going outside of yoga to inform their yoga, which is so fantastic.
Yep.
With Feldenkrais and physical therapy and so many other things. But with all of that said, I agree with you that at some point, like, the edutainment has to stop and we have to
I love that word.
go in, and start to teach from our direct experience. And I think one of the things you and I were talking before we started recording about some of our beloved teachers. And I think one of the things that really draws me into a teacher is when you feel that this is something they really embody.
Yes, that's right. Yes, and Yogi Bhajan spoke about that a lot. He said, if your presence doesn't work for you, nothing will. And I think as a young teacher out there, it's really good to remember that you don't have to be teaching the latest craze. You don't have to be teaching the trickiest class. You just have to be authentically yourself, because the moment you are authentically yourself and you're guiding somebody in mindful based practices, you're giving them permission to be their authentic self. And in my experience of teaching yoga, it's the space between the words where the real transformation happens. So the people's transformation is not up to you. It's what all you're doing as a teacher is you are facilitating a certain experience. You're laying a little bit of the groundwork, but that transformation that someone has, it comes in the quiet, subtle spaces. So as a teacher, we have to be mindful and have that really good relationship with our ego, where we're not attached to being the one who is creating that. We're not attached to being clever. We're not attached to being anything other than in service to those souls who show up. And if we can do that, I think that we can mitigate a lot of the over talking, over teaching that we're getting out there in the yoga world right now, where people are just trying too hard and it's not coming from an authentic place. It's not helpful to read something in the morning philosophy wise and simply regurgitate it in the afternoon if it doesn't have some relevant grounding within you. I hope that makes sense to you guys out there. It's just that we lose people when we go into that place of trying too hard. For me, the most profound teachers are those who say little, they're grounded, and that in their presence, I feel such a sense of ease, such a sense of, everything's good.
Mm.
Um, and then we're leading people towards that union, that sense of coming into contact with their whole holistic experience of life. Yeah.
So that's so beautiful. And I think, I mean, I was just, my pen was going, like writing notes. You had so many beautiful gems there to share. How do you, to switch tracks a little bit? So your career, I'm sure, has gone through lots of ebbs and flows. You've been doing this for a long time. So can you share a little bit about how you've come into creating this mindset of being okay with what is, with an abundant mindset, if you will, and what's helped you stay on track when maybe things weren't going as you'd expect or desire?
Well, I can only just say one word, which you know so well, sadhana. I I haven't felt a sense of lack since I've been on purpose with my sadhana. I'm not I'm not I'm not relating to life from a place of lack. I'm relating to life from a place of my devotion to this path of consciousness. And what I found by making that the big rock of my day, that's the thing that I get to before anything else, that everything else that comes, it seems to flow with a lot of ease as long as I'm listening. For example, I knew that I wanted to do my first 200-hour teacher training away from LA because I'd just been teaching a lot of yoga works, teacher trainings. I didn't want to compete, and I just didn't want to, be in that position. But I didn't know where it was going to be. I booked something a little bit out of town, and then I canceled it. It wasn't feeling right. And I happened to be in India, and I went to this piece of land, and loud and clear as a bell, it was obvious to me that I had to do a teacher training there, and and so I committed to it. And right afterwards, I was like, "Wow, you're going to do a training in India? Who are you to do a training in India at the birthplace of yoga?" And yet, it was a resounding yes that I had to do it. So for me, this path has been committing to my sadhana and then being willing to take those risks, if you like, when the resounding yes comes. And since I did that, it's just those when I make a decision from that heart space, from that knowing, they really flow. When I get all intellectual and I make a decision from that place of the intellect, eh, you know, it'll do okay, but it doesn't have that same juice. So you might ask then, well, why make a decision from your intellect? Well, if I'm making a decision based on, here's my business plan for the year, I have to get this many trainings in and this many festivals and this, then I start to work from the mind. Well, then I've got to fit something in here. Well, where will I pick to put this there? And it stops having that natural organic flow. I hope this is making sense to you guys. This is just my personal experience. So again, I've had to let go. There's an organic nature to what we do, just like you can't overplan a class because you don't know who's going to show up for the class and how you will adjust, so that it meets them where they are at that day. I found the same thing with my schedule. There are necessities to book ahead a big chunk of time, like 200-hour teacher trainings. But I've tried to not micromanage my schedule now so that I can go with the joy of what wants to happen, and to stop trying to drive it from this place that I see. There's a pressure right now that I witness in people who are wanting to jump on board the marketing bandwagon and start to push what they're doing in a certain way. And although that may work for business people and may work for, I guess, whomever does try it to a certain degree, I think that for me at least, what keeps the juice alive, what keeps the abundance mentality and that sense of prosperity and regalness to what I'm doing is when I'm allowing it to flow through me and not get too business on top of it. It's such a fine balance, because what I also witness in this world as we live in it right now as yogis, as yoga teachers, is we are as much marketers as we are yoga teachers. And that's just the nature of where yoga is at right now, because it's so much of how we're connecting, like right now, is through this online technology medium. It's not the same as just wandering down to your local studio and finding a teacher anymore. And so for me, the biggest sort of challenge in the last 5 years was to find what felt like an authentic balance to my scheduling and an authentic balance to how do I communicate with people through this medium that feels authentic. And I'm not buying into all these marketing techniques that honestly make me want to throw up. If I get one more emails, with those corny taglines, I'm like, oh, please just stop. Right? So this world that we're in right now, where we're interfacing in this way, I think the greatest challenge that faces us yogis who are wanting to branch out and offer to a wider audience is how to keep our message authentic, but also how to value ourselves enough that we're willing to market in a way that might not feel necessarily comfortable. And then how do we do that where it feels in absolute integrity with who we are and what we're teaching? I don't know. For me, those are all woven together.
Mm-hmm. I think that's really helpful. I, as a mentor of teachers and a coach, I work with that a lot. People really freaked out about marketing. They're really freaked out about how to put themselves out in the world, whether it comes from a place of lacking confidence or it comes from a place of just genuinely like appreciating the teaching so much they don't want to be disrespectful in some way. And so I think you're right. There's like such a balance that you have to strike where you're definitely putting yourself out there and honoring your worth and your time and your energy and your work, but also being clear about what you're offering people. And I think when you're clear, as you obviously are, in who you are and what your intention is and what you have to share with people, people feel it. And then the marketing is this authentic thing. It's not actually marketing, it's like sharing.
That's right. Exactly. Nicely put. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to just for some people out there that are newer to you, how are some ways that you've gone out of the box with your teaching? I know that obviously you have your teacher training, which is a phenomenal program that takes people all over the world and is really unique in that way. But you're also on Yoga Glow, and you have taken the yoga really outside the neighborhood studio.
Yeah, I mean, that was in my heart. That was my underlying intention. And Yoga Glow has been a wonderful online home for me. And it allows me the ability to connect with students all over the world, which I really so value.
Mm-hmm.
It's a wonderful thing. And there's so many ways, that one can do that. You can have your own YouTube channel. There's so many other online platforms these days. So different ways, that you can get yourself out in that way. I always love, as I mentioned, to travel. So for me, going to festivals has been a wonderful way to actually have more direct personal contact with people who may be practicing with me online, and also retreats. I really love retreats. Very early on in my career, I understood that for me, the deep value that I wanted to share with people wasn't going to come through the hour or hour and a half class. It was going to come through deep immersive experiences. And so that's really what I've been developing over the last probably 7 years, is how to maximize that experience of transformation. So whether it's a 3-day, a 5-day, a 7-day, a 10-day, or a 23-day, like how to maximize that process of transformation in a way that can be integrated and really set somebody up for success when they leave. So that's kind of been my bigger sort of focus within the focus in what I'm doing, because that's where I see the kind of shift in people's lives that is sustainable, and that's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, I would love to know if there's any other pearls of wisdom that you want to share with the yoga teachers out there. I mean, you've already dropped many, but if there's any final thoughts or ideas or concepts that you would like to leave us with.
I just think you being you, i.e. whoever, is watching this right now, you being you, just being on this path and showing up with your wholeheartedness, and being willing to do the work of self-reflection and self-correction. You are the leaders of this world, the true leaders, because if we can lead through example, then we're helping people to become empowered in a way where we're not needing to be governed by outside forces anymore, but we're really truly governing ourselves. And if we can do that in our own lives, and if we can pass that on by example to others, then I feel like we are creating the world that we all really, really want to live in, where and I see that, by the way, as I'm out and about. I know you guys do too. We are not really such a minority anymore, those of us who believe and think and feel in this way. And the more we do this work and get out there, the more we share this perception, this way of living, and this is the way we shift the collective consciousness. I really believe that, and that's what's so exciting about yoga and science these days is, as you mentioned, all of these other methodologies coming in to supplement yoga. Well, the scientists and the quantum physicists are really reflecting what we know in yoga. They're reflecting information about the collective consciousness. That to me is so exciting, because I know in my own direct experience that we can change on that big collective level, and it doesn't take the whole world to do that. It only takes X number of us to do that, and we create that quantum kind of awakening, if you like, where we move on a collective level from such density and suffering to a place of more possibility and lightness. So that's what I'm holding a vision for, with all those of us who are so dedicated to the yoga path right now, that we can be real catalysts for change, for a quantum leap in the way that human beings are being and doing. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Thank you. That's a perfect place to end. So for our friends watching, you can find Kia at kiamiller.com. You teach on Yoga Glow, so people can access your teaching there, which I love Yoga Glow, and I take you and Elena and so many awesome, Jason Crandall, so many of my favorite teachers are on there. And are there any other places we can find you on Instagram or Facebook?
Pia Miller Yoga. I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I have a Radiant Body Yoga private group that you feel welcome to apply for. So we can accept you. And I offer a lot of kind of, well, you know, I'm doing my 40 days to greater awareness there. So I'm doing daily videos talking about different facets of awareness. And I created the group because I wanted it to be a place where we are in constant communication as a community of yogis, supporting and helping one another along this path. So so there's another way to connect in.
Is that on Facebook, the Radiant Body group?
Yeah, it's on Facebook, Radiant Body Yoga, and it's a private group, and you apply, and then we receive you, and we get to share there. Yeah, so that's the intention.
Fantastic. And I'll share the links below as well so people can access all of your good stuff. Thank you so much for being here. Such a pleasure.
Yay.
And thanks for being a part of it. Sat Nam.
Sat Nam.